How do you teach your own son the value of respect when he sells your late wife's treasured earrings for a vacation? When he shrugs off your pain, how do you show him you're not the weak, forgiving father he assumes? This is how I calmly took back everything he thought he'd won, and made sure he'd never forget the lesson. The morning started like any other Tuesday. I was sitting in my kitchen, drinking coffee from the same mug Margaret had bought me 15 years ago, the one with the faded "World's Best Dad" print that Derek used to trace with his tiny fingers when he was 5. Now, at 63, I found myself wondering where that little boy had gone, and when exactly my son had stopped seeing me as anything more than a walking ATM. My phone buzzed with a text from Derek. "Dad, can you swing by? Vanessa wants to show you something." I should have known better. Nothing good ever came from Vanessa wanting to show me something. But I'm a father, and despite everything, I still held on to hope that maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. The drive across town to Derek's suburban house took 20 minutes. It was a nice place. 3 bedrooms, 2-car garage, manicured lawn. I should know. I'd helped with the down payment 2 years ago when Derek married Vanessa. I'd also furnished most of it with wedding gifts: a top-of-the-line refrigerator, a matching washer and dryer set, a 65-inch television, and a dozen other appliances that had cost me nearly 3 months of my retirement savings. Derek answered the door with that same sheepish grin he'd worn as a kid when he'd broken something. Behind him, Vanessa stood with her arms crossed, her blonde hair pulled back in that severe ponytail she favored when she meant business. "Hey, Dad," Derek said, stepping aside. "Come on in." The house felt different somehow, emptier, though I couldn't immediately place why. Vanessa led us to the living room, where her mother Linda was sprawled across the leather sectional I'd bought them, scrolling through her phone with perfectly manicured nails. "Franklin," Linda said without looking up. "How nice of you to drop by." I'd asked her a dozen times to call me Frank. She never did. "So," Vanessa began, perching on the edge of the coffee table, "we wanted to talk to you about something exciting. Linda's treating us to a trip to Hawaii next week." "That's wonderful," I said, though something in her tone made my stomach clench. "A little vacation will be good for you both." "Well, that's the thing," Derek jumped in, running his hand through his hair, a nervous habit he'd had since childhood. "The flights were more expensive than we thought, and with Linda's condo rental and everything, we needed a little extra cash," Vanessa finished smoothly. "So we had to make some adjustments." That's when I noticed it. The small display case on the mantel, the one where Derek kept Margaret's jewelry, was gone. My wife's jewelry box, the one I'd given him after the memorial service 3 years ago, was nowhere to be seen. "Where's your mother's jewelry box?" I asked Derek directly. He couldn't meet my eyes. "Oh, that. Well, we thought... it was just sitting there, and Mom's not..." "We sold a few pieces," Vanessa interrupted. "Nothing important, just some old earrings that were collecting dust." The room went silent, except for the hum of the refrigerator, the one I'd bought them. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I kept my voice level. "Which earrings?" "The pearl ones," Derek mumbled, "with the little diamonds." Those weren't just any pearl earrings. They were Margaret's grandmother's earrings, passed down through 3 generations. She'd worn them on our wedding day, and to Derek's graduation, and to every important moment in our lives together. They were the last thing she'd asked me to save for Derek's future wife, not to sell, but to pass down. "Those were your mother's most treasured possession," I said quietly. Vanessa rolled her eyes. "They were just sitting in a box, Franklin. It's not like she can wear them anymore." "Besides," Linda chimed in from the couch, "young people need experiences, not dusty old jewelry. Hawaii will give them memories to last a lifetime." I looked at my son, really looked at him. He was 29 years old, tall and broad-shouldered like his mother's side of the family, with my brown eyes and her stubborn chin. But right now, He looked like a stranger. "Derek," I said, "do you understand what you've done?" He shrugged. "Dad, they're just earrings. She doesn't need them." The words hit me like a physical blow. Just earrings. She doesn't need them. "How much did you get for them?" I asked. $800, Vanessa said proudly. The pawn shop said they were good quality. $800. 3 generations of family history, sold for $800 to fund a vacation. "We should get going," Derek said, glancing at his watch. "Our flight leaves in 3 hours." I followed them outside, watching as they loaded designer suitcases into the Uber that had just pulled up. Linda climbed into the front seat, already chattering to the driver about their destination. Vanessa slid in next to her, her phone out to document their departure. Derek paused at the car door. "Dad, I know you're upset, but you'll see. This trip is exactly what we need. When we get back, we'll have so many stories to tell you." "I'm sure you will," I said. He leaned over and gave me an awkward hug. "Love you, Dad. We'll bring you back something nice." "Don't worry about it," I replied, my hand closing around the spare keys in my pocket, the ones Derek had given me for emergencies 6 months ago. I stood at the curb and watched the Uber disappear around the corner, carrying my son, his wife, and her mother toward their Hawaiian adventure. The afternoon sun beat down on my shoulders, but I felt cold inside. They thought they'd won. They thought I'd go home, sulk for a few days, and be ready with my usual understanding smile when they returned with their tans and their stories. They had no idea what was coming. The drive back to my house gave me time to think. 20 minutes of quiet road, 20 minutes to remember how we'd gotten to this point. Derek hadn't always been like this. When Margaret was alive, he'd been different, more thoughtful, more connected to family values. I remembered him at 8 years old, carefully helping his mother tend her garden, listening intently as she told him about her grandmother's earrings and the stories they carried. He'd promised to take good care of them someday, but Margaret had been gone for 3 years now, and in that time, Derek had changed. Or maybe I'd just been too blind to see who he really was. I pulled into my driveway and sat for a moment, looking at the modest 2-story house Margaret and I had bought 35 years ago. It wasn't much. 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a garage that barely fit my pickup truck. But it was home. More importantly, it was paid for, which meant my retirement savings had been available for other things, like helping my son. My neighbor Ruth McConnell was watering her flower boxes when I got out of the truck. At 68, Ruth had the sharp eyes of someone who'd raised 4 children and buried 1 husband. She'd been Margaret's closest friend, and since the funeral, she'd appointed herself my unofficial keeper. "You look like someone stole your lunch money," she called over the fence. "Something like that," I said. Ruth set down her watering can and walked over to the property line. "Want to talk about it?" I found myself telling her everything, about the earrings, about Derek's casual dismissal, about Vanessa's cold calculation and Linda's smug approval. Ruth listened without interrupting, her weathered face growing more serious with each detail. "Frank," she said when I finished, "I need to tell you something. Last week at the grocery store, I overheard Vanessa talking to one of her real estate friends. She was complaining about how you're always dropping by with more junk, and how she wished you'd just give them cash instead of useless appliances." My hands clenched into fists. She said that? Word for word. And there's more. She said something about how you're too sentimental about old things, and how Derek needs to set better boundaries with you. I thought about all the gifts I'd given them over the years. The refrigerator when their old one stopped working. The washer and dryer set for their first apartment. The big screen TV for their living room. The hot tub I'd had installed in their backyard last summer. Every purchase carefully planned, every receipt filed away in my garage workshop. She also mentioned, Ruth continued gently, that Derek was finally ready to cash in some of the old lady's jewelry for their trip. the old lady. That's what Vanessa called Margaret. Frank, honey, Ruth said, reaching across the fence to touch my arm. You've been too generous with them. They don't appreciate what you've given them. They see it as their due. That evening, I sat in my garage workshop, surrounded by the tools and projects that had kept me busy since Margaret's passing. On the workbench was a manila folder labeled Receipts and Warranties, my meticulous record of every major purchase I'd made for Derek over the years. I opened the folder and spread the papers across the bench. Refrigerator, $2,400. Washer and dryer, $1,800. Television, $3,200. Hot tub installation, $8,500. Dining room set, $1,600. The list went on and on, a paper trail of my love and generosity, spanning nearly a decade. Next to the receipts, I placed Margaret's photograph, the one from our 25th anniversary, where she was wearing those pearl earrings and smiling at the camera with pure joy. "What would you do, Maggie?" I whispered to the photograph. But I already knew the answer. Margaret had always believed in consequences. She'd been the disciplinarian in our house, the one who made sure Derek learned that actions had results. I'd been the softy, the one who gave in too easily, who smoothed over problems with gifts and second chances. Maybe it was time to learn from her example. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number for Eugene Becker. Gene ran the pawn shop downtown, and we'd known each other since high school. If Derek had sold Margaret's earrings locally, Gene would know about it. "Gene's Pawn and Jewelry," came the familiar, gravelly voice. "Gene, it's Frank Aldridge." "Frank, how the hell are you? Haven't seen you since Margaret's service." "I'm calling about some earrings that might have come through your shop recently. Pearl and diamond, probably brought in by a young man named Derek." There was a pause. "Ah, hell. Frank, please tell me those weren't family pieces." My heart sank. "They belonged to my wife." "That's unfortunate." "Yeah, your boy came in yesterday. Nice-looking earrings, real quality. I gave him $800 for them, which was fair market value, but if I'd known they were Margaret's—" "It's not your fault, Gene. You had no way of knowing." "Listen, Frank, I haven't put them in the display case yet. They're still in the back. If you want to buy them back, I'll give you the same price I paid. No markup." "I appreciate that, Gene. Can you hold them for me for a few days?" "Absolutely. And Frank, I'm sorry about this. Your boy seemed like he was in a real hurry to make the sale." After I hung up, I sat in the quiet garage for a long time, thinking. Derek and Vanessa were in Hawaii, probably sipping drinks by the pool, laughing about the old man and his sentimental attachment to just earrings. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated me. I pulled out a yellow legal pad and began making a list. Every appliance, every piece of furniture, every gift I'd given them over the years. Next to each item, I wrote down the original purchase price and the serial number from my receipts. By the time I finished, the total came to just over $37,000. $37,000 worth of my generosity, sitting in their house, while they vacationed on the proceeds from selling my late wife's treasured belongings. I looked at Margaret's photograph again. "Don't worry, sweetheart," I said softly. "I'm going to bring your earrings home." The next morning, I drove downtown to Gene's pawn shop. The familiar smell of old leather and metal polish greeted me as I pushed through the door, bells jingling overhead. Gene emerged from the back room, a stocky man with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Frank, good to see you. Come on back." He led me to his office, a cramped space behind the main shop floor filled with filing cabinets and coffee-stained paperwork. From a small safe, he withdrew a velvet jewelry box. "Here they are," he said, opening the box carefully. My breath caught. There they were, Margaret's grandmother's earrings. The pearls gleamed with that soft luster I remembered, and the tiny diamonds caught the light like captured stars. I could see Margaret wearing them, could hear her voice telling Derek about their history, their significance. "Beautiful pieces," Jean said quietly. "Real quality. The pearls are natural, not cultured, and the diamonds are excellent clarity, probably worth twice what I paid, to be honest." "May I?" I asked, reaching for the box. Jean nodded, and I lifted one of the earrings, feeling its familiar weight in my palm. Margaret had cleaned these every month, had stored them carefully in their special box, had worn them only on the most important occasions. "Jean," I said, "I need to ask you about the redemption process. How does it work?" "Well, normally, the seller has 30 days to buy back the item for the loan amount plus interest. But in this case, since I bought them outright, they're mine to sell. However," he leaned back in his chair, "if you want to buy them back at cost, I'm happy to do that. Like I said, no markup." "I'll take them," I said immediately. "Hold on, Frank. You don't need to decide right now. Let me hold them for you while you think about it." But I was already reaching for my wallet. $800, most of my monthly retirement check, but worth every penny. Jean accepted the cash and handed me the jewelry box. "There's something else," I said as I stood to leave. "Do you happen to have the pawn slip Derek signed?" Jean rummaged through a file folder and produced a carbon copy of the transaction. There it was, in Derek's familiar handwriting. Derek Aldridge and his signature, along with his driver's license number and phone number. "Can I get a copy of this?" "Sure thing." Jean made a photocopy and handed it to me. "Frank, I hope everything works out. Derek seemed like a good kid when I knew him growing up." "So did I said, quietly. From the pawn shop, I drove to my lawyer's office. Well, not exactly my lawyer. Tom Brennan was more of a friend who happened to practice law. We'd known each other since our kids played Little League together 20 years ago. Tom's office was in a modest building near the courthouse, nothing fancy but professional. His secretary showed me into his office, where Tom sat behind a desk covered with case files and legal briefs. "Frank Aldridge," he said, standing to shake my hand. "What brings you by? Don't tell me you're finally ready to update that will. Actually, I need some advice about gifts and property law." Tom gestured for me to sit down. "What kind of gifts?" I explained the situation, the appliances I'd bought for Derek and Vanessa, the earrings they'd sold, the upcoming confrontation I was planning. Tom listened carefully, occasionally taking notes on a yellow pad. "Interesting situation," he said when I finished. "Legally speaking, once you give someone a gift, it becomes their property. You can't normally just take it back because you're angry." My heart sank. "So I have no recourse?" "I didn't say that. There are exceptions. If the gift was given under false pretenses, or if there was fraud involved, or if the recipients violated an explicit condition of the gift, you might have grounds to reclaim the property." "What kind of conditions?" Tom leaned back in his chair. "Well, for example, if you gave them the appliances with the understanding that they were for their family home and they sold them for profit, that could be considered a violation of the gift's intent. Or if they accepted the gifts while planning to sell family heirlooms against your wishes, that could constitute fraud." "So I could legally take back the appliances?" "Potentially, yes. But Frank, I have to ask, is this really the route you want to go? We're talking about your son here." I thought about Derek's shrug, about Vanessa calling Margaret the old lady, about Linda's smug satisfaction as they drove away to their vacation. Tom, what if I had spare keys to their house? What if I simply retrieved the items I purchased without damaging anything or taking anything that wasn't originally mine? Tom was quiet for a long moment. "Hypothetically speaking, if you could prove ownership of the items, and if you had legal access to the property, and if you didn't commit any acts of vandalism or theft, hypothetically you might be within your rights. And if they called the police? You'd need documentation, receipts, serial numbers, proof of purchase, and you'd need to be very careful about how you did it. No damage, no taking anything that wasn't originally yours, no harassment or threats. I nodded slowly. Hypothetically. Hypothetically, Tom agreed. Frank, whatever you're planning, be smart about it, and if you need legal representation afterward, call me. That afternoon, I sat in my garage workshop with Margaret's earrings in their velvet box, surrounded by years of receipts and warranties. I had Derek's spare keys on the workbench next to my cell phone, which showed 17 missed calls from Ruth. I called her back. Frank, where have you been? I've been worried sick. Just running some errands. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong exactly. It's just... Well, I saw a moving truck at Derek's house this morning. Big one, from Murphy's moving company. I thought maybe they were getting new furniture or something, but what? Well, the truck was there for about 3 hours, and when it left, it looked pretty full. Frank, you don't think they're moving, do you? Without telling you? I looked at the spare keys glinting in the afternoon sunlight streaming through the garage window. No, Ruth, I don't think they're moving. Oh. Well, that's good then. I was worried they were planning to relocate without saying goodbye. Don't worry about it, I said. Everything's going to be fine. After I hung up, I opened my laptop and began researching appliance resale values. The refrigerator alone was worth $1,800 on the used market. The washer and dryer set, barely 2 years old, could easily bring $1,500. The big screen TV, still under warranty, was worth at least $2,500. By my calculations, I could recoup nearly $25,000 from the resale of the appliances I'd purchased for Derek and Vanessa. More than enough to cover the earrings, with plenty left over. I picked up my phone and dialed Murphy's moving company. Murphy's, this is Janet. Hi, Janet. I need to schedule a pickup for tomorrow morning. Multiple large appliances from a residential address. Certainly, sir. Can I get your name and the pickup address? I gave her Derek's address and my contact information. The items will be ready for pickup at 9 a.m. sharp. Perfect. Will someone be there to supervise the loading? Yes, I said, looking at Derek's spare keys. Someone will definitely be there. Thursday morning dawned clear and crisp, perfect weather for what I had planned. I'd been awake since 5, sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee and a detailed list of everything I intended to remove from Derek and Vanessa's house. At 7:30, I drove across town to their neighborhood. The streets were quiet, most of the residents already at work or getting their kids ready for school. I parked 2 blocks away and walked to Derek's house, the spare keys feeling heavy in my pocket. The front door opened easily. I stepped inside and was immediately struck by how different the house felt without Derek and Vanessa's presence. Empty, but also somehow lighter. I pulled out my phone and began taking photographs, wide shots of each room, close-ups of the appliances I'd purchased, serial number plates clearly visible. Documentation. That's what Tom had emphasized. If this went sideways, I needed proof that everything I was taking belonged to me originally. The refrigerator stood in the kitchen, humming quietly. A stainless steel Whirlpool model, 25 cubic feet, with the serial number WRS325FDAB printed on a sticker inside the doorframe. I cross-referenced it with my receipt. Perfect match. I unplugged it and began emptying the contents into coolers I'd brought from home. The washer and dryer were in the utility room off the kitchen, another matched set, purchased from the same appliance store 2 years ago. I disconnected the water lines and electrical connections carefully, coiling the hoses neatly beside each unit. In the living room, the 65-inch Samsung television dominated one wall. I remembered the day I'd bought it. Derek had just gotten his promotion at the car dealership, and Vanessa had mentioned how much she wanted a bigger TV for movie nights. The thing had cost me $3,000, but seeing Derek's excitement had made it worthwhile. Now, as I carefully disconnected the cables and wrapped the screen in moving blankets, I felt nothing but cold determination. The hot tub was more complicated. It was built into the deck in the backyard, connected to electrical and plumbing systems. But I'd kept the installer's contact information and a quick phone call confirmed that they could disconnect and remove it for $800, a fraction of what I'd paid to have it installed. "Can you do it today?" I asked. "Sure thing, Mr. Aldridge. We'll be there by noon." By the time the Murphys' moving truck arrived at 9 a.m., I had everything organized and ready. The driver, a burly man named Pete, looked around the house with professional assessment. "Lot of stuff to move," he said. "You sure about the timeline?" "Everything needs to be out by 3 p.m., I told him. "My son and his family are returning from vacation tonight." "No problem. Where are we taking it?" I gave him the address of Second-Hand Appliances, a used goods dealer across town. The owner, Carl Hendricks, had agreed to purchase everything sight unseen based on my description and the serial numbers. He was offering $22,000 for the lot, less than I'd paid originally, but fair market value for used appliances. As Pete and his crew loaded the truck, I walked through the house one more time, checking my list: refrigerator, washer, dryer, television, dining room set, living room furniture, bedroom set from the guest room, all items I'd purchased and given as gifts over the years. I left everything that Derek and Vanessa had bought themselves: their personal belongings, their clothes, their books and knickknacks, all untouched. This wasn't about revenge in the petty sense. This was about reclaiming what was mine and teaching a lesson about respect. The hot tub removal crew arrived at noon, just as the moving truck was pulling away. They worked efficiently, disconnecting the electrical and plumbing, then using a small crane to lift the unit onto their trailer. "What do you want us to do with it?" the foreman asked. "Take it to Second-Hand Appliances on Maple Street. They're expecting it." By 2:30, Derek and Vanessa's house was empty of everything I'd ever given them. I walked through the rooms one final time, my footsteps echoing on the hardwood floors. The house looked sparse, but not damaged, just empty of the generous gifts I'd provided over the years. In the kitchen, I left a handwritten note on the counter. "Your house is yours. My gifts are mine. Ask yourself why. Dad." From Derek's house, I drove straight to Second-Hand Appliances. Carl Hendricks was waiting in his warehouse, surrounded by my former gifts to Derek and Vanessa. "Everything's in excellent condition," Carl said, running his hands over the refrigerator's stainless steel surface. "Your son took good care of these." "He did," I agreed. "They were important to him once." Carl handed me a cashier's check for $22,000. "Pleasure doing business with you, Frank. If you ever have more appliances to sell, give me a call." My next stop was the bank. The teller, a young woman named Patricia, whom I'd known since she was a teenager, processed the deposit with professional efficiency. "Big deposit today, Mr. Aldridge," she commented. "Selling some things I don't need anymore," I said. From the bank, I drove back to Gene's pawn shop. He was waiting for me with Margaret's earrings, now cleaned and polished to their original luster. "They look beautiful," Gene said, handing me the velvet box. "Margaret would be happy to have them home." "Yes," I said, cradling the box carefully. "She would." That evening, I sat in my living room with Margaret's jewelry box on the coffee table before me. I opened it carefully and placed the earrings in their designated spot, right where they belonged. Next to them, I placed the pawn shop receipt showing Derek's signature and the cashier's check stub showing the deposit of $22,000. My phone had been buzzing all afternoon with calls from Derek's number. I'd ignored everyone. Tomorrow, when they returned from Hawaii with their tans and their stories, they would discover the true cost of their casual cruelty. I picked up Margaret's photograph from the mantel and looked into her familiar brown eyes. "They're home, sweetheart," I whispered. "Your earrings are home." Outside, the sun was setting over the quiet neighborhood where Margaret and I had raised our son, where we'd taught him about love and respect and the value of family. Tomorrow, Derek would learn whether any of those lessons had actually taken root. Friday morning arrived gray and overcast, matching my mood perfectly. I'd slept better than I had in months, the weight of Margaret's earrings safely back where they belonged, giving me a peace I hadn't expected. I decided to take a walk through Riverside Park, the same place where I'd pushed Derek on the swings 30 years ago, where Margaret and I had celebrated his high school graduation with a picnic, where we'd scattered her ashes 3 years ago beneath the old oak tree by the pond. The park was quiet, except for an occasional jogger and a few early morning dog walkers. I found myself drawn to the playground, where a father was teaching his young son to throw a baseball. The boy couldn't have been more than 6, all elbows and enthusiasm, missing the ball more often than he caught it. "Keep your eye on it, buddy," the father said patiently. "Don't worry about catching it perfect. Just focus on the ball." The boy nodded seriously and positioned his glove. This time, when his father tossed the ball gently underhand, it landed squarely in the pocket of his glove. "I did it!" the boy shouted, jumping up and down. "Did you see, Dad? I caught it." "I saw," the father said, beaming with pride. "You did great, son." I watched them for a few more minutes, remembering similar mornings with Derek. Where had I gone wrong? When had teaching moments become missed opportunities? When had I stopped being a father and become just a source of material comfort? Margaret would have known. She'd always been better at seeing the big picture, at understanding the difference between love and indulgence. My phone buzzed with a text message. Derek again. "Dad, tried calling. Flight delayed but should be home by 8 p.m. Can you stock the fridge for us? We'll be tired and hungry. Thanks." I stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. By afternoon, I was back home, sitting in my living room with Margaret's jewelry box open on the coffee table. The earrings gleamed in their velvet setting, looking exactly as they had the last time Margaret wore them, to Derek's wedding, where she'd whispered to me during the ceremony that she hoped Vanessa would learn to appreciate family traditions. My phone rang. Vanessa's number this time. "Hi, Franklin, it's Vanessa. We've been trying to reach you. Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine," I said calmly. "Oh, good. We were worried when you didn't answer Derek's calls. Listen, we're at the airport now, about to board our connecting flight. We should be home around 8 tonight. Derek asked if you could pick up some groceries for us. We're going to be exhausted, and we'd love to tell you all about the trip over dinner." "I don't think that's going to work out," I said. There was a pause. "Oh, well, that's okay. We can order pizza or something. But we definitely want to see you tomorrow. We brought you back something special from Maui." "How thoughtful. Franklin, you sound strange. Are you sure everything's okay?" "Everything's exactly as it should be, Vanessa." After I hung up, I walked through my house, looking at the photographs that lined the hallways and covered the mantelpiece. Derek at 5, missing his 2 front teeth. Derek at 10, holding up a fish we'd caught on a camping trip. Derek at 18, in his graduation cap and gown. Derek and Vanessa on their wedding day, Margaret's earrings glinting at her ears as she smiled for the camera. When had those smiles become calculation? When had family become commodity? At 6 o'clock, I drove across town one more time to Derek's neighborhood. I parked down the street from their house, far enough away to avoid immediate detection, but close enough to watch. The house looked exactly as I'd left it, neat, undamaged, and completely empty of my gifts. At 7:15, a taxi pulled into the driveway. I watched through my windshield as Derek, Vanessa, and Linda climbed out, tanned and relaxed, pulling expensive luggage from the trunk. They were laughing about something, probably sharing stories from their Hawaiian adventure. Derek paid the driver while Vanessa and Linda headed for the front door, Linda gesticulating wildly as she described what looked like a particularly amusing anecdote. They looked like people without a care in the world, people who'd successfully manipulated a foolish old man into funding their vacation. Derek unlocked the front door and held it open for the women. They disappeared inside, still chatting and laughing. Then the voices stopped. My phone exploded with calls. Derek's number, then Vanessa's, then Derek's again. I let them all go to voicemail. The front door burst open, and Derek came running out, looking wildly up and down the street. Even from a distance, I could see the panic on his face. He pulled out his phone and started dialing frantically. Vanessa appeared in the doorway behind him, her mouth moving rapidly as she spoke into her own phone. Linda joined them on the front steps, her vacation glow replaced by shocked confusion. Derek started walking up and down the street, peering into neighbors' yards as if he expected to find a 65-inch television hiding behind a garden shed. Vanessa was gesturing angrily at the empty house, her voice carrying across the evening air, even though I couldn't make out the words. My phone buzzed with a text from Derek. "Dad, where are you? Someone robbed the house! Everything is gone!" I turned off my phone and started the engine. As I drove away, I could see Derek in my rearview mirror, standing in the middle of the street, his phone pressed to his ear, his free hand running through his hair in that familiar gesture of panic. Tomorrow, I would answer their calls. Tomorrow, I would deliver the lesson that was 30 years overdue. Tonight, I would go home and have dinner with Margaret's photograph, her earrings safely returned to their rightful place. The reckoning was coming. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn clarity that made everything seem sharper, more defined. I was sitting at my kitchen table drinking coffee and reading the newspaper when my phone started ringing at exactly 8 a.m. Derek's number. I let it ring 4 times before answering. "Hello, Derek." "Dad, thank God. Where have you been? We've been calling you all night. Someone broke into the house while we were gone. They took everything. The TV, the fridge, the washer and dryer, even the hot tub. We called the police, but they said it's weird because nothing was damaged and they only took the expensive stuff. Dad, this is a disaster." "That does sound serious," I said calmly, taking another sip of coffee. "Can you come over? The police want to talk to anyone who might have seen something suspicious, and we need to figure out what to do about the insurance claim. Vanessa's freaking out and Linda's talking about cutting her vacation short to come help us deal with this." "I'll be right there," I said. The drive across town felt different this time. Final, somehow. Like the last mile of a very long journey. Derek's house looked exactly as I'd left it. Pristine exterior, empty interior. There were no police cars in the driveway, which told me everything I needed to know about how seriously the authorities were taking their complaint. Derek met me at the front door, his vacation tan unable to hide the stress lines around his eyes. "Dad, I'm so glad you're here. This is just unbelievable. Who would do something like this?" "That's a very good question," I said, stepping into the empty living room. Vanessa was pacing back and forth across the hardwood floors, her phone pressed to her ear. "No, I understand that, but this wasn't a normal burglary. They took specific items. Very expensive items. There has to be something you can do." Linda sat on one of the few remaining pieces of furniture, a chair Derek and Vanessa had bought themselves, looking bewildered and angry. "This is exactly why I told you two to invest in a better security system. In my neighborhood, we have cameras on every corner. The police said they'd file a report," Derek told me, "but they seemed to think it was an inside job. They kept asking about who had keys to the house." He paused, looking directly at me. "Dad, you still have your spare keys, right?" I reached into my pocket and pulled out the key ring, holding it up so he could see it clearly. "Right here." "Good. I was worried maybe someone had stolen them or something." Derek ran his hand through his hair. "I just don't understand how this happened. Everything you gave us over the years, gone. The refrigerator, the TV, all of it. It's like someone knew exactly what to take." "That is strange," I agreed. Vanessa ended her phone call and stormed over to us. "The insurance company says they need a complete inventory of everything that was stolen, with receipts and serial numbers. How are we supposed to provide receipts for gifts?" She looked at me expectantly. "Franklin, you kept the receipts for the things you bought us, right?" "Oh yes," I said. "I keep very detailed records." Thank God. Can you bring them over? The insurance adjuster wants to see them this afternoon. Actually, I said, reaching into my jacket pocket, I brought them with me. I pulled out a manila folder and handed it to Derek. He opened it eagerly, then frowned in confusion. Dad, these aren't receipts. What is this? Derek held up the first document, the pawn shop receipt showing his signature and the sale of Margaret's earrings. His face went white as he read it. Where did you get this? He whispered. From Gene Becker at the pawn shop downtown. You remember Gene, don't you? He went to high school with me. He was very sorry to hear that you'd sold your mother's earrings. Vanessa snatched the paper from Derek's hands. What is this about earrings? Derek, what is he talking about? I reached into my other pocket and pulled out Margaret's jewelry box, opening it to reveal the pearl and diamond earrings nestled in their velvet setting. These earrings, I said quietly, the ones that belong to my wife's grandmother, the ones Derek sold for $800 to fund your vacation. The room went completely silent except for the tick of the wall clock, the one clock I hadn't bought them. I don't understand, Linda said, looking back and forth between us. What does this have to do with the robbery? I handed Derek the second document from the folder, the cashier's check stub showing the $22,000 deposit. There was no robbery, I said calmly. I took back what was mine. Derek's knees buckled, and he sat down hard on the floor. You... what? Every appliance, every piece of furniture, every gift I gave you over the years. I removed them from this house while you were in Hawaii. I sold them to second-hand appliances for $22,000. I used $800 of that to buy back your mother's earrings from the pawn shop. Vanessa's face had gone from tan to bright red. You can't do that. Those were gifts. You gave them to us. I pulled out the third document, Tom Brennan's legal opinion, typed on official letterhead. According to my attorney, gifts given under false pretenses can be legally reclaimed by the original owner. When you accepted my generosity while planning to sell family heirlooms against my explicit wishes, you committed fraud. This is insane, Vanessa shrieked. Derek, call the police! He stole our stuff! Go ahead, I said, handing Derek my phone. Call them. Show them the receipts proving I purchased everything. Show them the photographs I took documenting the serial numbers. Show them your signature on the pawn shop receipt. Derek stared at the phone, but didn't take it. Linda stood up, her vacation outfit wrinkled and her face flushed with indignation. Franklin, this is completely unreasonable. You're ruining their home over some old jewelry. Old jewelry? I turned to face her directly. Those earrings belonged to Margaret's grandmother. They were passed down through 3 generations. Margaret wore them on our wedding day, and to Derek's graduation, and to every important moment in our lives. She asked me specifically to save them for Derek's wife, not to sell, but to treasure. I looked at Derek, who was still sitting on the floor, staring at the pawn shop receipt. Your mother told you the story of those earrings 100 times. She made you promise to take care of them, and you sold them for vacation money. Dad, You shrugged, I continued, my voice still calm but carrying 30 years of disappointment. When I asked you why you sold them, you shrugged and said, They're just earrings, Dad. She doesn't need them. Derek's face crumpled. I didn't mean... Yes, you did. You meant exactly what you said. To you, your mother's memory is just old jewelry. My years of generosity are just free appliances. My love for this family is just an endless source of funding for your lifestyle. Vanessa stepped between us, her finger pointed at my chest. You had no right to take our things. I'm calling the police right now. Please do, I said, pulling out my own phone. I'll wait. She dialed 911, her hands shaking with rage. Yes, I need to report a theft. Someone broke into our house and stole all our appliances on... What? No? We weren't home. Yes, I know who did it. The conversation went downhill from there. I could hear the dispatcher's voice through the phone, asking about proof of ownership, about whether any damage had been done, about whether Vanessa wanted to file charges against a family member who had receipts for everything he'd taken. Vanessa hung up in frustration. "They said it's a civil matter. They won't even send an officer." "That's because no crime was committed," I said. "I took back what was mine, nothing more." Derek finally stood up, the pawn shop receipt still clutched in his hand. "Dad, please. I know I messed up, but we can fix this. I'll buy back Mom's earrings. We'll make this right." I closed the jewelry box with a soft snap. "You can't buy them back, Derek. I already did. With the money I got from selling the gifts I gave you. Then we'll get new appliances, we'll replace everything." "With what money? You spent your savings on Hawaii, remember?" Derek's face went through a series of emotions: panic, anger, desperation, and finally, something that might have been understanding. "You planned this," he said quietly. "You planned all of this." "Yes, I did. Just like you planned to sell your mother's earrings while I was none the wiser." "But I'm your son." "Yes," I said, looking at him with 30 years of love and disappointment and final resolution. "You're my son, and this is the last lesson I'm going to teach you." I walked toward the front door, then paused and turned back. "Derek, when you were 8 years old, you broke your mother's favorite vase while playing baseball in the house. Do you remember what she told you?" Derek nodded slowly, tears starting to form in his eyes. "She said, 'Actions have consequences, sweetheart. When you break something precious, you don't get to just say sorry and walk away. You have to live with what you've done.'" I opened the front door and stepped outside into the crisp morning air. "You broke something precious, son. Now you get to live with what you've done." I walked to my truck, got in, and drove away without looking back. Behind me, I could hear Vanessa screaming at Derek, Linda shouting about lawyers and lawsuits, and Derek calling my name. But I was done. 30 years of being the understanding father, the generous provider, the man who always gave second chances. All of it was finished. Margaret's earrings were home where they belonged, and Derek had finally learned the lesson his mother had tried to teach him so many years ago. Actions have consequences, and some things, once broken, can never be repaired. The sound of the front door closing behind me echoed through the empty house like a judge's gavel, final and absolute.